Hello everyone, I'm Andrea from Marcus Evans. I would like to thank you all for attending today's webinar, How Can Organizations Thrive Amidst a Semistic Shift in Digital Experience, brought to you in partnership with CSS Corp. Before we begin, I would like to cover a few housekeeping items. As you can see at the bottom of your screen, there are multiple application widgets you can use. All widgets are resizable and movable, so feel free to move them around to get the most out of your desktop space. If you have any questions during the webinar, you can submit them through the Q&A widget. We will try to answer as many as possible during the webinar, but if a fuller answer is needed or we run out of time, we'll make sure to follow up with you in a separate email. A copy of today's slide deck is available in the resource list. We encourage everyone to download or save any links you may find useful. For the best viewing experience, we recommend using a wired internet connection and closing any programs or browser sessions running in the background. You can find additional answers to some common technical issues located in the Help widget at the bottom of your screen. Lastly, we would like to remind you to look out for an email within the next 2 hours after the event is done that will include links to watch the event on demand and to download resources. Now I would like to hand it over to Dilip, who will be moderating our discussion for today. Over to you, Dilip.
Thank you so much, Andrea, and welcome to this interactive webinar on digital experience. How you as organizations can thrive among the various changes as well as various shifts that we see in digital experience. So we will actually have a bunch of conversations around how the different perspectives on digital are changing. And to start with, let me introduce the panel, the esteemed panel who are going to drive a lot of this conversation. So requesting Dave, JK, Venkat to introduce yourselves on this panel. Dave, over to you. Dave, looks like you are on mute.
Thanks, Dilip. I was. Hello, everybody. My name is Dave Hughes. I lead our IT and digital space for Kimberly-Clark, our Walmart business. And I've got a lot of experience in the industry on the CPG and retail side. And I'm looking forward to our discussion today.
Thanks, Dave. JK, over to you.
Thanks, Dilip. My name is JK Venkatesh. I lead enterprise product analytics, optimization, and machine learning for Thomson Reuters. Been in the analytics, machine learning, and optimization industry for a little over 12, 13 years. And most of my focus has been on fintech, retail, and CPG.
Thanks, JK. Over to you, Venkat.
Hello, everyone. My name is Venkat Gadepalli. I lead analytics and software solutions at Blackboard in the education industry. Thanks,
Venkat. And finally, my name is Dilip Patnaik. I'm going to be moderating this panel. I lead digital for CSS Corp. CSS Corp is a mid-sized company. I'll probably, before we start the webinar, I'll just get it quickly introduce CSS Corp to you and quickly, and then get into the panel conversation. We have a bunch of topics that we would like to cover, and we'll take a look at the agenda as well. So as I said, from an agenda standpoint, we will start with CSS Corp, a very quick snapshot. I promise I won't spend more than 5 to 7 minutes on this. And then we will get into the panel discussion topics. The topics are, the first topic is the different trends. And as you can recognize from the panel, we have a very varied panel. We have someone from the retail industry, someone from the CPG industry. We have a leader from the media as well as the data consumption industry, and we have a leader from the from the learning management space and the technology in the learning management space. So we will pretty much drive this discussion across trends. What are B2C organizations doing? What are B2B organizations doing? And how is data enabling and driving the shift of the adoption of digital into the entire landscape of business. And finally, as we move on, we will also do a Q&A. We will spend around 10 to 15 minutes on Q&A as we move on. Please drop in your questions, as Andrea pointed out, into the Q&A widget. And we will make sure that we go through the questions as well as, and we'll try to answer as many questions as possible. So moving on, let me start with a quick poll, and I'm sure some of you are seeing the poll as well. And before we get into the trends as well as cover some of the topics, I think if you can respond to this poll, that would be very helpful. What's the top driver for this rapid adoption of digital? And there are 4 options. Please go ahead and provide your response to that. It will also help you as well as help us to validate whether what we are thinking is the right direction of thought or not. Okay. Moving on, a quick snapshot about CSS Corp. So CSS Corp, some of you may have heard of us, but we are about an 8,500 employee company, with about 18 global centers. We work across 25 languages. As you can see on the map, we have presence pretty much around the globe. We do obviously have a 24/7 coverage for a lot of our clients. We call ourselves a right-sized company, and what that means is that we have the DNA of a small company. We have the ability to actually be agile for our clients, as well as we have a scale of about 8,000 plus 9,000 resources who can actually scale for any program, and that's something that we are very proud of. We want to keep ourselves having the DNA of a small company. We operate in about 4 or 5 service lines, primarily on the customer experience enterprise support space, as well as on the digital and technology space. So we have built some deep capabilities on digital technologies across commerce, experience, support, the entire user interface, user experience gambit, as well as supporting capabilities as well. So I'll talk about that in the following slides. So CSS Corp, once more, quite highly awarded in the mid-tier services landscape. We have been pretty much been given a lot of awards in the industry. Over the last 2 years, we've been awarded with 35 plus awards. I think the last count is that we are close to 50 awards over the last 2 years. So that speaks a lot about how we have made ourselves relevant to changing landscapes from a client standpoint, from a consumer standpoint, etc. And very proud of the way that we have addressed this space. And finally, what do we do in digital? We look at digital across 2 lenses: the lens of what eventually your end consumer sees or your user of the platform sees, and the supporting digital function. From the front end standpoint, we look at digital across 3 areas, and we have specialized and have deep capabilities across digital commerce, which includes obviously the omnichannel commerce, social commerce, very personalized front end capabilities, and we have delivered this for a lot of industry leading Fortune 50 companies, Fortune 100 and Fortune 500 companies. From a digital experience standpoint, we develop a lot of portals, front-end content, mobile apps, different front-end consumption assets for our clients. Whether it is, it can be across different channels, and we have a bunch of accelerator solutions as well in the space. On the support standpoint, we have our own IP, which works with market-leading platforms such as Amazon Connects, Salesforce, Zendesk, etc., which actually helps in providing front-end support for our clients, which includes virtual chatbots, a 360 dashboard for support agents, self-service portals, etc. So we have our own IP as well as we work with market-leading platforms in that space. And on supporting digital functions, digital assurance. In fact, one of the least addressed areas in digital is how do you actually test so many assets that are going through. Retail companies have hundreds of thousands of products that are being listed on their portals as well as on their digital assets. And there is no way to actually go and look at all of these pages that are there on your digital assets. So our digital assurance platform actually improves user experience, goes and makes sure that the content is good, the templates are good. There is a seamless integration across different digital assets from mobile to portal to any of the other different consumption devices. The second supporting digital capability is on IBPM and low code. Everything that you are building does need to be integrated across different systems, across different third-party applications, etc. And finally, data and analytics. Data analytics and automation is also something that digital relies heavily on, and that's something that we are focusing on as well. So that's about it from a CSS Corp standpoint. And what I will now do is that let's quickly look at the results of the poll question that I put up. What is the top driver for this adoption of digital? And not surprisingly, the pandemic seems to be the largest driver. The second and third are very closely tied between cloud and basically because of the adoption of cloud and the ease of adopting digital infrastructure, the Gen Z and millennials consumption of digital is also supposedly the other driver. So let's actually look at what are the trends that are actually really driving that as we move forward. Now, as a follow-up to this, right, and I think it's very interesting that some of you pointed out that Gen Z and millennials are actually driving a lot of this shift, and then that the pandemic is also driving, probably the biggest driver for digital. Let's look at a follow-up question on this poll. We are also putting up a poll now for which age demographic is digital experience the most important. By that, what we mean is that the experience of making sure that the consistency of the different app platforms are similar, whether you're using an app on the phone or on your iPad or on your browser, the consistency is the best. Making sure that the integration into different social platforms is good. So which demographic is the most glued into digital experience? I think that's the question. So your inputs are going to be very helpful, and we'll probably discuss that through the course of this panel discussion. Okay. So thank you so much for your responses, and keep providing your responses to the poll. It's going to stay open for a few more minutes, and let's now jump into the panel discussion. So the first topic, as I pointed out, is that what are the different trends driving digital disruption? And let us start with the point that actually gave us the highest volume on the poll. So Venkat, first of all, thank you so much for joining. And a question to you is that, is it a misnomer that the pandemic is the driver? I think the audience feels otherwise. But what are your thoughts on the pandemic being a driver for this disruption?
I actually agree with the poll. There is a lot of shift in the digital side due to the pandemic, because if you look at from the retail side, right, the stores, there are a lot of stores closed and they're like a reduced capacity, and shoppers doesn't want to get into the indoor spaces, right? That's kind of driving the industry more into the digital space. If you look at from U.S. Department of Commerce published a report, right? In Q2 of 2020 compared to Q2 2020 to Q2 of 2019, there is an increase of spend in the online almost 44.4%. There is a big spike in that digital space, right? That's kind of from the retail perspective. But if you look at where I came from, the education, right? In the past, we used to have the online courses. People used to take some courses online, and the other part of the course is almost 50% face-to-face, right? They go into the class and take it. But because of universities closing down and people going remote tutoring, we have seen a lot of increase, 400% increase of our LMS system over the last 1 year. And similar to that, similar to WebEx and this tool we are using right now, we have something called Collaborate for online interaction between the faculty and the students, right? That software usage increased dramatically, 48,000% increase of usage of that collab tool, which is kind of equivalent to WebEx and other tools, right? And also the same thing, when we look at the mobile usage, we have seen Blackboard Learn, which is kind of provides the course content and everything to the end users. Mobile usage increased by 40% as well. So if you put all of this in that perspective, definitely there is the pandemic is driving the people more into the digital online world, in my view.
Yep, completely appreciate that. And, obviously, probably, the digital disruption had started ahead. The concept of digital being so relevant to all of us has been there, but as the meme goes, right, the chief digital officer nowadays has become the pandemic for a lot of organizations, right? Because the trajectory of digital adoption has gone up significantly since the pandemic. Probably only one of the few positives that the pandemic brought to play, right, is the reduction of the middleman and the improvement of how the pandemic has actually brought to play. So moving on to the next topic. So Dave, any thoughts on the second topic? The race to improve client experience and driving revenues. What has been the speed of adoption, as well as how is it playing out in the market? Probably your experience with Kimberly-Clark as well as Walmart might be helpful in providing that response, Dave.
Retailers have known for years the relationship between convenience and creating an easy method for people to shop and buy their products and driving top-line growth. And if you look in the physical world, they've made massive investments in making it easy for people to shop by building out different store formats, right? Super centers versus smaller mid-size markets versus convenience stores, etc. And they put these investments in place to make it easy to fit different shoppers' preferred methods of buying things. Well, in the digital space, you're seeing a kind of a parallel to that too. You're seeing massive investments in making it easy for people to purchase online and get their products. And if you look at the different options available today in the market, you can purchase something online and you can pick it up in the store today. In Walmart's case, you can go to the store and pick it up. You can pick it up curbside with the pandemic. People like the curbside service. Some retailers, you can pick it up through storage lockers in store. Lowe's comes to mind. Amazon comes to mind with locker storage pickup. You can have delivery to home from a local delivery service. You can have delivery through national services like FedEx and UPS, etc. And then you can have product shipped to store if there's physical stores for that retailer. You can have it shipped to the store and pick it up at the store. So you're seeing massive investments in both the digital space kind of following along with the investments that have been made in that physical space, all because the easier you make it for people to buy things, the more often they're going to buy from you, and their future baskets will likely be bigger.
Right. And makes a lot of sense, Dave. And how about the costs? Do you see any change in the way that the cost of digital has changed? And I'm sure that's not relevant to the pandemic, but how is the cost of adopting digital? Has it been? And I do know that there are some examples which are relevant also to the education industry. But yeah, Dave, your response would be helpful.
Yeah, I'll tell you, in the retail CPG space, I think it's interesting to look at that question from the other direction. For instance, what's the cost of not investing in a digital transformation? And for me, there's a lot of costs involved in not adopting or accelerating digital transformation. But three that come to mind for me are people and talent. Mm-hmm. Another one is around customer analytics. And another one is around the increased cost of marketing, right? And just to kind of touch on the people talent piece of it, we just in the survey that we just did, Dilip, we're looking at Gen Z and millennials, and those two groups make up the majority of today's workforce, right? Right. Mm-hmm. Those talented people grew up with digital, right? It's not a novelty to them, it's an expectation. So when when they're deciding, hey, what company do I want to work for? And who do I want to work with? They're going to be drawn to the company cultures that embrace digital, right? So that's one thing. The other part is if a company doesn't invest in digital, yes, at least in the CPG retail space, they're forfeiting all of the analytics and the consumer shopper customer data that can be collected to better understand who your shopper is. And that's the lifeblood of a brand, right? Really understanding who is your shopper and how do you cater your products to that shopper. Right. Yep. And then the third area is just around marketing, right? I mean, if you're not invested in the digital space for marketing, traditional marketers know how expensive it is to connect with shoppers versus it's a lot easier in the internet digital space to connect with thousands of interested shoppers and to understand and analyze the ROI that you get from those consumers. So bottom line, it makes really good sense for companies to accelerate that digital transformation. It's good for the bottom line, it's good for the top line. And I think it's getting to the point where it's just table stakes if you want to compete in the market.
Absolutely. I think great set of points there, Dave. I think especially around the opportunity cost, one is the real cost as well as the opportunity cost, as well as, why companies cannot not do digital anymore. It's something that is, that's a must do. And also around the cost. One of the points that I would like to add to that is that the cost of adoption of digital has actually not really gone down dramatically because of the volumes. I think that is the next trend that is expected, that we expect to see as well. The cost of adoption of digital is going to go down simply because there are, it's going to become a commodity very soon. And, we will start seeing that the unit cost of adopting digital will start going down as well. That brings me to the next point, JK, and your perspective from the consumption side is going to be very helpful, especially, and because you come from the data background, what is the average age of the consumer for digital? Is there any trending data around it? What is your qualitative and quantitative perspective on that? JK, it would be really helpful if you can respond to that.
Yeah, thanks, Dilip. The number is progressively going down, right? And you're going to get different perspectives from different places. But the one I picked up, a few weeks ago, based on some research with, sources like Forbes and, some from HubSpot on CMS, interaction, the age is right around the low 20s. which is kind of surprising and interesting. And it's if you look at the projection of how it's going, and the shift started back in 2008, accelerated in 2012 and 13 and 14, and then a seismic drop in 2019 and 20. 20, of course, we know what the reason is. And there's a couple things that they attribute to the differences. And it is pretty interesting because if you look at the step shifts are always caused by pressures on the industry. 2001, just after the boom, just after the bubble burst, there was a change. 2008, after the crisis, there was a change. 2012 and 13, there was a change. 2020, of course, we all know what the change is, right?
Right.
And the difference here is that in the first 2001 to 8, it actually went up a little, and they call it the complexity shift, right? The systems were more complex to use. You needed computer science and some basic knowledge about what you're using to get them used. So the age went up. And then the ones after 2012, it actually started trending down. And majority of it is adopted. The gaming industry revolutionized some of that, right? And then started all of the apps, the teen apps. Right now, one of the biggest things they're calling is TikTok. TikTok is basically pulling the age down a lot because of the usage. And as a personal example, I can also say, 90s, 80s, 90s kids, first time I touched a cell phone, I'm probably in my late teens, right? And now I'm looking at my kid who's 4 years old. He tells me where to go to Walmart, which Walmart to get to, and then which aisle to get to, so that he can get the exact toy he needs. He's 4 years old. So demographic like that is actually pulling down the number a lot. And what we're going to see is that number aggressively trending down. And I'm based on the math and the research we're seeing from Forbes and all, the number should probably average at about 15, 16, where I think the bulk of the audience is going to be. And I'd be very interested to see what the team shows up on the survey and what they decide is the biggest demographic on the age that is driving this change. It'll be good to see if that validates some of what I'm saying.
Very, very interesting points there, JK. Especially and whenever we as we basically or large organizations look at selling demographics, they typically start with 18 years old as the selling demographic, right? And that paradigm has completely changed. In fact, the paradigm or the age demographic that you need to start with is probably you need to start with as you said 4 years old, right? So it's a very important shift that everybody needs to recognize. All CDOs have started to recognize, all data gurus have started to recognize, and that's something that we believe is going to help in the direct to consumer aspect of selling to cutting out the middleman, making sure that the end customer is directly going to the spot that they want to, whether it's in terms of a retail experience or a digital experience standpoint. So it comes to the next question, JK, I think staying with you. So what's your take on direct to consumer as such? Because we recognize that you as Thomson Reuters have two completely different units for how you are actually selling content, right? Whether to the consumer or to the businesses. So are there any trends that you see from a change in the way that direct to consumer is changing that landscape?
Yeah. And thanks, Dilip. One of the things I'm going to start with is saying, I think the shift that Amazon and Apple embraced back in 2000s and right now is going across the industry. And Thomson Reuters, we're kind of taking customer centricity as the pillar stone to build things around. What that means is, when we talk to specific, small business customers, these are customers who are not willing to go through 5 different steps, fill out 10 different forms, and talk to 3 people to get to a quote and then get started with a subscription, right? What that means is I need to build my product in a way that they don't spend more than 15, 20 minutes signing up and then getting started to use, right? So from a consumer standpoint, especially tending towards the smaller businesses and then individual businesses, it is extremely digital savvy. They are, and this is irrespective of the age, right? Mainly because if I'm running a business, I have, only a certain amount of time to do certain things. And if that includes, signing up for a subscription that'll enable my business, I have a certain amount of time for that. I don't have time to make 3 phone calls, be on hold, and talk to 5 different people, get different price negotiations, and then haggle the price and all, right? I want to get to a site, and then I want to see a price. I want to decide then and there if I want to get it or not, make a decision, move on, right? Yes or no, either way of the decision. So from a direct-to-consumer trend, one of the biggest things we're seeing, and which kind of leads into some of the topics we're going to discuss today, is they want things to be extremely simple. They want things to be presented in a very neat fashion, in very small amount of content. So you read it, you take 2 minutes, you understand it, you move on, right? And then that's one side of the shift. And then the second side of the shift is that all of the consumers, and this is pretty much all, and not even saying the small customers, want almost everything digital. You want to pay a bill, they want it digital. You want to, get a code, that's digital. One of the 2 of the, interesting facts here going outside of my company that was interesting for 2021 and 2020, 2 specific sectors made a breakthrough with direct-to-consumer trending. One is the alcoholic beverage industry, grew at about 1,400%. And the second one, which is a smaller base, but then it's growing exponentially, is digital legal marijuana business, 65,000%. So those are all industry examples on how the industry is blowing up in terms of getting to direct-to-consumer. And I would say that is just scratching the surface.
Right. And I guess, the rise in those 2 categories of alcoholic beverages and marijuana is also probably related to the amount of time that we are spending with ourselves at home, right?
That's a soft correlation we can absolutely derive.
Yes. Yeah. So moving on to the next area, and and how B2C is changing, right? And I think one of the examples that that the entire digital world is actually talking about is, for example, Nike, right? So Nike has moved away from selling through an Amazon.com or an eBay or any of those aggregators, and Nike only sells. You cannot really buy a Nike shoe through an Amazon. You can only buy a Nike shoe through Nike.com, and they trust their digital experience being much better in that space. So B2C is becoming much more relevant. B2B will obviously stay relevant always, but B2C is becoming much more relevant and staying close to the topic. So, JK, if you would like to quickly talk about what is the simplification strategy, what is it that different organizations are doing in that space of simplifying the experience for the end clients, as well as simplifying the supply chain. Anything that you want to cover in that space, very helpful to hear. Very looking forward to hear your thoughts on that.
Absolutely, and I'm going to connect this back to the customer centricity piece. Given that your age of the consumer is going down, you want it simpler and simpler. For a 4-year-old to act on an app, it needs to be that simple that you don't have to learn a manual and get started.
Right.
Likewise, you're going to take the example of TikTok. You go into TikTok, there's no personalization setup needed. You go in, you sign up, you watch a couple things, and then your feed is automated based on that. And they've been largely successful with that. That is what the industry is expecting right now. You know who I am. You're tracking data on who I am. You're tracking data on what I use. You're tracking data on what I know. Talk to me specifically about what I care about. And that's a table stakes right now. Back in 2008-9, that was an innovation that we could boast. Right now, it's table stakes. So when you come into the site, if the site already knows, if the app already knows, if I've given information to the app that I am an XYZ customer with XYZ revenue, I expect the app to cater down to what is relevant for me. I don't care about what else you do, right? In that vein, one of the biggest things that's happening right now is the customer centricity modeling that basically parts out ways for each of the customer. If you're a small customer, you go a certain route. If you're a big customer, you go a certain route. And that is, again, being taken off as table stakes. And what I wanted to close that topic by saying is that, one of the biggest things that we're going to see here, that we are seeing here, is that personalization is going to be key for anything on digital and omnichannel experiences. And that is going to be driving the simplicity of what a customer needs.
Great point. And I guess you already covered the second topic a bit in that, JK, so I'll probably stick with you. And in case any of the panelists have anything to add, please do so. But, what is the differentiation, and what are the items driving differentiation in this space, JK?
Yeah, so the differentiation, I would put it in 3 different buckets. One is the consumer experience itself, right? Which is if I talk to you in a certain language, how good is my language, right? That is orchestrated by my language, my display, my CX, my images, my design, right? All of that. So that's one bucket. The second bucket is pricing and the monetary aspects of what you're selling, right? Obviously, everything demands a price, and how much the price demands is absolutely dependent on what you deliver. So again, it's interconnected with the consumer experience. So that's the second part. And the third part is the platform and the customer experience of how this is all, orchestrated. If I have a problem, do I have to, wait on a call for 15 minutes, or can I just get into a chat bot and get my questions answered? If it's as simple as just show me if my last check cleared, right? So keeping that, one of the biggest differentiations is going to be how some of these companies, some of these brands, especially the growing brands, can rapidly speed up on, going on the channel. And one of the examples that Dave gave is right for this. The store should not care or worry about how I put in the order. As long as my order is fulfilled, as long as I get the same experience wherever I pick the data from, right? I pick the product from. So that way, I think that is going to be one of the biggest differentiations. And we're going to talk about MarTech a lot, but one of the things I'll say is, if you look at the skeletal structure, the flesh and the skin and all of that, marketing technology, the MarTech stack, needs to be so connected so that your central nervous system is powering every bit of your, body's functions. So marketing technology and orchestrating all of this is going to be a major, either a pain point or a boon. Right.
Great point there, JK, especially on how MarTech needs to be very closely integrated with every other aspect. I think the invasion of, or the pervasion of, CRM into every aspect of organizations is critical to make sure that happens. So moving on very quickly, again, a quick time check. We have about 23 minutes to go. And what I would like to do is that we'd like to leave about 10 minutes for Q&A at the end, and request the forum to actually make sure you put in your questions so that we can answer them in the last 10 or 15 minutes of the segment. So Dave, very quickly, if you could just summarize your thoughts on what is the cohesive experience that clients and consumers are looking at between store and online. That correlation is also going to be quite helpful.
Yeah, when you look at retailers who have, again, in the retail space, when you look at retailers who have physical store presence and they've got an online shopping site, which are most stores, they've got expertise in both areas, right? And what you're seeing is a lot of interest where these retailers leverage the powers of one for the benefit of the other. A couple examples come to mind in the Walmart space for sure. One of them is this year Walmart is on their mobile app, they're implementing wayfinding for their stores, right? In other words, they took a model from airports, right? People navigating through concourses, terminals, gates to find their way to their next flight. They took that concept and they're deployed their app this year to make it easy for people to find the shelf that an item is on in their stores. So you walk into a store with your iPhone, you might search for an item, and it's going to give you a map through the store to that shelf. So that's one example of using the power of digital, right, to drive convenience and a frictionless experience in store for physical shopping. On the other side, you've got another great example with online grocery shopping and pickup. And I'm sure some of the folks on the call today are using that offering from Walmart. But it's a great experience, right? Where you create your order online, maybe at your kitchen table. Mm-hmm. You submit the order, you drive to the store. When you pull into the parking lot, you pull into a spot. Sometimes before the car's even stopped, you've got a person bringing out your groceries, waiting for you, almost like a chauffeur service, right? And loading the groceries into your vehicle for you. So it makes the shopper feel really special. It's taking advantage of that digital capability, plus the physical benefits of it. And your shopper feels special. And again, a shopper who's happy and feels special, they're going to come back and be repeat customers and continue buying more and more stuff from you. So yeah, that whole cohesive environment is a big target and a big goal.
Yep, absolutely. And also basically the entire concept of, buying online, paying in store, buying online, returning in store, the different, the retail, the retail industry has actually completely transformed itself in the way that we interact with them, right? So I for one would not like to go back to actual in-store shopping and standing in queues, right? So that's something that I'm done with. So I'm going to leverage this forever. The pandemic is something that taught us that. The last point on communities and social computing, again, it's a very relevant one, especially to companies which have had a significant lack of presence from a social computing standpoint. A lot of organizations are now adopting, the community-based as well as social computing-based selling model, from a marketing standpoint, but also from a support standpoint. I think those are the two elements, not the actual transaction, but not the actual purchase transaction, but both the marketing, the reach out, as well as the support is something that is coming closely together. Your digital systems as well as the CRM systems need to make sure that they're integrated with Twitter handles, Facebook handles, probably Instagram handles, and as Jacob was saying, probably in the future even TikTok handles, to make sure that there is a strong connectivity across the buying behavior, the actual transaction, and eventually the support that you need to provide across channels. So with that, let me move on to the results and of the question that we asked, for which age demographic is digital experience the most important? And what has come up is what probably reinforces what JK said, right? So Gen Z is probably driving about 57%, and that's probably very close to what JK was assuming in terms of the overall numbers. Very interesting to see that Gen X is also driving about 20% of the adoption. So what it also means is that probably the pandemic has actually made a lot of older people like me actually drive adoption towards digital, right? So we were, if I want to buy something, I would obviously go to the store in the past, but that's something that I'm making sure that actually I've used the digital platform much easily, and now I recognize the benefit of moving towards a complete digital experience. So very interesting poll result. Keep your questions coming on the Q&A, and we'll move on to the third topic, which is very similar to the second topic, but completely different technologies, data, etc., that we need to bring in on how are B2B organizations addressing digital. So what I would recommend is that I think maybe we could go quickly to Dave to continue with the thought process. So in B2B, and especially in the space that you work in, Dave, with with large customers for you like Walmart and some of the other buyers, how are you personalizing the buyer experience? What is it that you need to do from a B2B standpoint? And maybe you could address both these questions together, of personalizing the buying experience and the omnichannel experience that you're offering, both to your internal and external stakeholders.
A big A big strategy in CPGs is to work really closely with the strategy of the retailers, right? And essentially fitting brands inside of the delivery vehicles and the tools that retailers have. In the space, I think JK mentioned this a little bit earlier too, around personalization. I think you're going to see a real big shift over the coming years in brands adopting what we call habit loops, right? And a habit loop is a lot, there's three pieces to it, right? There's a trigger to it, there's a routine, and a reward at the end. Social media has done a great job with this with big tech platforms like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, etc., where when a new message comes in, your phone beeps, your routine is to pull it out of your pocket or your purse, and your reward is seeing a message from a friend.
Right.
You're gonna see brands really start to grab hold of this in order to keep engaged with their consumers and shoppers, and they see the power that's brought to Facebook, Instagram, etc. Brands are going to do that same thing and really start to build that relationship through that habit loop forming.
Understood. Thank you so much for that, Dave. And I know that JK, you covered some of the elements around MarTech, around marketing technology. So do you have anything to add specific to B2B on that?
The only advice I'd say, and this is from me and my partners in the organization, is don't go after shiny objects if they're not gonna help you with anything that you want to solve in terms of a customer problem. We are currently embracing that right now, so I can kind of give it out as we've gone through that. That's a word of advice.
Absolutely. Yep. Thank you so much on that, JK. So Venkat, I think what is customer data management across teams, across nuclear teams, and how can you improve the overall the experience in terms of making it frictionless and making it zero red tape for B2B stakeholders? And because you work with, in your experience, you work with with organizations. So how is it that this is helping?
Yeah, I think we definitely need to have a purpose for gathering the information. Kind of like there's different ways you can capture, right? Like whether ethically through some sort of surveys or their online usage within the systems, right? Like and you have to regularly monitor the information and update it, and you have to also make sure that information is propagated to the core teams, right? Like the core teams who are going to be making decisions around whether the business or improving the customer experience or building innovation. I think that's very key for any business, to continuously capturing and monitoring those metrics.
Absolutely.
And related to that, the information has to be shared much easier, right? In the sense, there has to be defined rules and regulations on who can access the information quickly, right? To make the decisions, and they don't have to go through a lot of red tapes in the sense they have to fill out a 20-30 pages of data privacy and security information to gather. Those are the things upfront you have to set regulations on. Okay, this is the information we are gathering, and these are the set of people who can access this information through certain software. So I think it's kind of this all fits in together.
Understood.
Collecting and sharing the information across different teams.
Right, and that also is relevant, to make sure that the transparency of information is consistent, and different teams seeing the data at the same time takes away red tape and makes it a very frictionless experience, especially in B2B transactions. Right. So moving on to the final topic before we get into Q&A, is that data, and I know this is very close to the heart for all of you on this panel. But let's start with you, Venkat, on how do you think that data is enabling the shift, especially on and with the elements of different sets of data that's available, right, to pick up, especially with browser cookies or with login information. So what are the different breadcrumbs that you pick up from different sources to make sure that data is actually visible to you, consumption is visible to you?
This is kind of somewhat related to the previous conversation we had on how do you manage this data, right? Like, with the lot of online activities we do on browsing through purchasing activities, it's like a bits and pieces of information we are leaving trail in our websites, right? Like, as the consumer comes in, but those breadcrumbs, like if we put all that in a big context, it's actually going to lead you to a loaf, right? Like, essentially. So you have to look at, like, you have to define on what matters for your business, and then collect the relevant information to join together to improve either the customer experience or your business, right?
Right. Yeah.
I'm just going to put that in educational context. With our learning management system, students logs in every day into the Blackboard Learn, and they take courses, and they attend webinars, and they submit assessments and assignments and all that stuff, right? Like, they're leaving a lot of trail in the LMS system.
Right.
But what we do in that is, like, we put all of that in a big context to see what is the student's grade, and what is their activity in the course, and how long they're watching a lecture, like, which is kind of a 30 minutes. So it's kind of
the gamut of their session is something you kind of stitch together. I completely recognize that, Venkat. Great point.
Exactly. It kind of leads to one last thing. It kind of gives the information to the faculty, right? Like, if a student is engaged a lot in the classroom, but if the grades are going down, somebody can intervene quicker to help the students.
Yeah. So now, basically, I know we are really running short of time. I think maybe in the next couple of minutes, if we can address these next 3 or 4 points. So, JK, if you would like to talk about how is data sciences, data quality, data governance, that entire gambit, right? How is that driving the shift, right? How are you leveraging data, not just in terms of what Venkat pointed out, but overall in terms of security, sciences, and governance?
Yeah, so the data science part of it's a double-edged sword, and I'll talk about both of these in like a minute. So the data science is moving from tangible to intangibles. What I mean by that is, in the first 5 years of my career, the only thing that I'd care about for data science is how can I make more revenue for the brand? How can I, make the customer stick better, right? It was always, what did the brand want? The last 5 years has turned itself upside down on, let's make the customer love and embrace our brand, in which case we will get rewarded with better business and the tangibles that are needed, right? So the math has changed. So things like predictive customer behavior, what is good for them, removing frictions for them, personalizing it for what is relevant for them, removing roadblocks, all of that, right? So that's the data science part. Now, the second side of the sword is that while I do this, I need to make sure that I don't creep out the customer. Are there pieces of information that I'm getting from the customer that the customer has not agreed to give me? And it's not just the creep out factor on the customer side, it's also legalities. CCPA, GDPR guidelines on how to make sure that you stay compliant is extremely important. So that's why there's not one analyst who will go into this equation and say, I'll bear all of this. You have experts that are needed for each of these areas that can come in and take the right actions and do their jobs perfectly, so that, one, you deliver the right experience, but then you don't do it at the cost of privacy and law and other legalities. Both of these need to be balanced.
Right. Fair enough. Yeah. So, thank you so much for that, JK. Now, basically, the next 2 points, maybe I'm just going to quickly cover them. The next best action, right, what JK talked about in terms of the data that is available from historical information can be used to drive next best action. For example, based on what a consumer is telling you, you can actually predict what the next best action is going to be and decide how to progress, right? In a selling transaction or in a support transaction. So those are the kind of activities that we have seen, leveraging analytics and data to drive that, as well as gamification. In Venkat's world of learning management systems, who is the person who has read the most number of courses? So who is the person who's actually done the most? So gamification has actually taken a significant amount of precedence here, and we have seen how gamification is actually improving it in some set of competitive individuals who actually want to gamify everything, right? So it's all, again, data. Gamification is not for everybody and not for every consumer, but it's actually something that we see that's coming through. So with that, basically, I would like to thank this panel to actually help cover all of these 4 different, very broad topics. And we'll probably quickly go through some of the questions that have come through from on the Q&A widget. Let me start with something that came from Brent Milby from Lockheed Martin on what will it take to further AR or augmented reality adoption among the general public. Let me actually respond to that straight away. One of my clients, Brent, is actually one of the largest cosmetics provider in the world. And what they have started to do is that rather than actually directly going to the consumer, basically in the retail stores, the augmented reality based execution and trying of cosmetics has become something that has the adoption is very, very high. So almost 50% of the online sales of their cosmetics products does use the augmented reality. So basically, you can try a cosmetic on a particular skin tone. So you can try it on your own skin tone. You can try it on. It reads the video. So obviously from your device. So that's one example. In your particular industry of Lockheed Martin, I cannot think of direct examples where we can test, where we can use AR, but I'm sure there are multiple examples, especially in the gaming industry. So the gaming industry does have a lot of AR examples, and we are seeing a bunch of adoption in that space. The next question is from Amy Barag from USAA. And anybody from the panel, if you would, can answer this. Maybe, even though customers are shifting more towards digital, how can organizations accelerate the adoption? Is there an adoption strategy? So other than bringing in clients, other than bringing in system integrators like CSS Corp to improve your digital adoption, what are the other steps that you guys can take? Sorry for slipping in a sales strategy there.
I can give you just my POV on what we are doing. Healthy competition is one way of making it happen. We are saying, I have about 6 teams under me, and in my team, in the way my organization works is that one team takes on a new MarTech, takes on a new strategy, and then they come back and present a use case to the rest of the group on here's what we did, right? It kind of, one, it inspires the rest of the team. 2, it also, if something is that tough, right? For us, Jira adoption was tough, right? For you guys, for some of you guys, it might be, very straightforward. And one of the teams did it, came back, and then they presented how that was used. And then, it was a tough shift, but then all of the teams now are at least know what an agile transformation is, know how backlogs work, know how, things are prioritized. So I would say healthy competition and doing it by showing it is one way to do it.
Yep, absolutely. And I see, I think you have already responded to something that came from someone called Ritu Sharma. How are the most successful organizations achieving it? I think the case studies that we hear are Estee Lauder, Nike, and what JK was talking about, right? So there are significant number of examples that we see have adopted digital to a level which have become examples in the way that organizations are thriving. So it is not something that is nice to have anymore. It's a must have. And so going forward, going to the next question, can digital transformation be led by IT? This is a question from John Janther from Radwell International. Can digital transformation be led by IT? There's a question. Maybe Dave, if you have any thoughts on that, that would be helpful. Can IT drive digital transformation completely?
Yeah, I think IT co-leads it, right? And I think IT is responsible for the foundation, the framework. We didn't get a chance to really talk data governance and integrity, but I think all of that which fuels new innovations and new capabilities on the digital front, I think IT owes it to the organization to build that foundation and to be looking strategically to make sure that we're future-proof and set up for the next big capabilities.
Right. Thank you so much for that, Dave. And I know we are at the top of the hour, so there are a few more questions that we could not answer. So what we will try to do is that we will try to answer them one-on-one to you separately. A couple of logistics before basically I'll hand it back to Andrea. You can reach out to us, CSS Corp. This is Dilip Patnaik. You can find me on LinkedIn. And you can reach out to us in case you have any questions specific to what we presented today. In case you have any direct questions to the panel, what I would recommend is that you go through us as well or through Andrea and we will make sure that we can get the questions answered. Andrea, back to you. And first, before that, a big thank you to the panel, JK, Dave, Venkat, for making this such an interactive and a learning experience for me too. Back to you, Andrea.
Thank you very much, Dilip, and thank you everyone in the panel for your insights today, for our audience for attending. I would like to remind everyone to look out for an email within the next 2 hours that will include links to watch the content on demand and to download the resources included in the content. We'd also like your feedback, so if you could take a minute to answer our very brief survey that will pop up on your screens right now, that will be very much appreciated. On behalf of CSS Corp and Marcus Evans Online Events, we would like to thank you all for attending and joining us, and we hope that you will be listening to our next webinar. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.